Hey folks, and welcome back. I'm Tyler Edlin, and we're gonna have a straightforward video today. We're gonna be painting some water, some rocks, a tree, and some mist. Just kind of an old school paint along sort of video. So let's get into it, and don't forget to subscribe to see more. Alright folks, so this is the original painting from my supporter and patron, which I'm very thankful for. Thank you, Sculpting. And there's several tiers, of course. People sign up for, get feedback and help, and then participate as well in the Discord. And that's kind of where all of this started right here. So when I see, whether it's my own work and I'm trying to push it further, or a student's, once it's at certain thresholds, like you have sketch, maybe color sketch, and then like finish painting, whatever sort of checkpoints or plateaus you want to break in the journey of an art piece into. Basically this is at a good one. For me, I'd call this a color sketch, and I understand for some people, of course, this might be a full finished painting, but for the sake of this, I'm going to categorize this as, hey, this is a color sketch. It's a mood sketch. It's kind of portraying the bigger ideas here. But if I want to take this something to maybe a little more portfolio level, if I want to just push it further in general, what could I do? And so what I'm going to do here with the student piece and when I'm working at my own art, when it's at this level, I like to make either a mental checklist, or in this case, I'll just kind of dictate it out. What are certain things that we can do to improve it? So, and I think all of that starts with a good thorough diagnosis and assessment of what's working, what's not working, and just to kind of throw out any other ideas that potentially didn't make it into a sketch at this stage. So the first thing, right, I do think this is a wonderful piece of art, and what I would start for with these goals is, because I'm a big color guy, it's a preference of mine, this is very monochromatic, right? And for those of you that are not sure what I mean, if I take this blue here and chart it like this, and then I take this blue here, see here, it's all in the same field of blue. On a technical scale, that would just mean, I guess technically monochromatic is meaning even more linear, straight up and down, it's all the same kind of family of blue, right? So anything like this, and you could sample any part of the painting, and do you see right here on Photoshop, this arrow never changes once. Therefore, it kind of lacks color variety. And so one of the first goals that I'll have when I take this is to push the color threshold, to get a little bit of variety in there. The second thing with that is harmonizing the color scheme as a whole. For me right now, this red is too red. It's not really there. It's not really working yet. If it's in a blue environment, this red is going to be affected by, right, a lot more blue. So it's going to be a cooler version of red, something that I feel would be far less saturated, maybe even darker depending on where the light is. And if this light is hitting it, how is that going to affect it? So I'm going to bring that down overall. The next thing is that there's a lot of digital artifacts that are still happening at this stage in the painting, which is very typical of an image in this sort of lifespan, as I generally myself tackle something like that toward the back end. So what I'm looking at, and what I mean in particular, right, is these very straight, stiff, digital, complex looking edges. Same with this, right? If you make a selection with a lasso tool and paint it in, it's going to look very similar. It doesn't feel like a natural sort of painting. Sometimes that's the goal. Most of the time it's not. So that's my little disclaimer out there. Sorry, a little on the stuffy side. I had the COVID 2 weeks ago. Still fighting that off. All right. So the big thing though, in terms of composition, what I want to do is bring more life into this. I want to make it feel a little more dramatic. I want to add a sense of movement. And so when I feel if we add more life by implying more wind, more motion in the water, more grass swaying, right? I feel it's going to add more life to it, and and part of the byproduct of that is it's not going to feel quite as stiff. It's not going to feel quite as static. So that's going to be the general roadmap for this. These, like the texture in the rocks on something like this, for me, that's like a little flat. It's a little too detailed, a little too texture heavy, I think, for this. So like this, for example, if we were on the stage of a play, it looks right like a flat cutout of a rock with a rock painted on it, rather than a rock painted with like actual, right, geometric and organic three-dimensional kind of forms. So I'm gonna attempt to address that as well. And of course, this has a good, honestly, a good breakdown of like shapes and in that regard. Like it has like, right, like big, we have like some medium, or like this is large, right? It has a good variety, bunch of small shapes here. I'm gonna try to push this idea of shapes and having, you know, big ones, medium ones. This is pretty big, this is pretty big, this is medium, this is small. I'm gonna try to push that and form them into a rhythm that helps the design. So let's get into this. All right, so from that list that we just made, I want to try to tackle probably the more, the larger, like the compositional things kind of first. And for me, it's going to require a little bit of play. I want to, you know, put some cards on the table, essentially kind of see how they work. So I'm going to start by kind of chiseling away with a very simple basic square, or sometimes people call them a chalk brush if you add a texture to it. That's kind of what this is. It's good because, like, depending on how I use it, I can get, you know, if I make it like an arch-like stroke, it looks fairly round. But if I move my hand straight, I get that hard edge. Good flexible brush like that will and always go a long way. And see, this is kind of what I mean by, like, I want to sculpt out some of these shapes to refine them, and then also kind of bring some form. So see, I'm like making really big, bold, explorative sort of marks like this to kind of see, like, how are all these pieces going to work and ultimately fit together on this. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole painting process. Just take the biggest, thickest, chunkiest brush you have, mark, you know, stamp it, drag it, you know, just kind of see, like, okay, now where I get the viewfinder, like, how my pieces essentially kind of fitting together. And so, like, I think I'm going to go a little bit lower, at least to start here on the right, and I want to drag and extend that kind of rock line behind. And then that way I can use the water and now this rock line that's going behind the tree to kind of create this swooping motion that goes kind of behind there. Just kind of funnel the viewer in, send them around for a ride, create a subtle sense of motion, right? Because with a picture like this, we have rocks. The rocks aren't moving. A tree is strong, it's tall, it's not moving at all, right? So it's a lot of, like, things that are just inanimate in a way. So we want to create that sense of motion with them, and that's the tough part. See, like, what I'm doing here is kind of like by instantly creating a light plane hitting the top surface of that tree, it's going to instantly start to make it look more three-dimensional. Because, like, right, we have that light coming in from the original source up in that upper left, and this tree is unaffected by it. Again, it more resembles a flat cutout prop on a stage play rather than some kind of three-dimensional thing. And so that's what I'm kind of trying to do. The other big thing is, and I kind of actually like this, is the genuine simplicity of this really does make it atmospheric. And I'm going to be worried that I'm going to lose that, because I want to take that very simple sky like I'm doing here. I want to break that up a bit. I want to use these shapes. I want to sculpt out some dramatic clouds. But at the same time, right, my concerns and things that I have to be worried about are overcomplicating the sky. We can't have that. If I make the sky too contrasty, it's going to get too busy. And if I just make too many small fussy shapes, it's going to overcomplicate things, which will, right, ultimately derail the image from some of its initial strengths. So these are all things that I'm going to be trying to juggle into my head right now as I'm doing this. I made a new layer, as you can see here, as I'm playing with the sky. I'm ultimately just going to chop it out, cut it out, and erase the parts like on the tree. That way I can just make big, expressive marks, essentially with light. Some of that's a little bit of an airbrush. These are all Photoshop standard brushes. And then, like, get that light to kind of come in, and then I'll just remove the light, kind of just clip it out where I don't need it, and that will get the forms and of course the shapes back, which is that's what we gotta keep track of at the end. So see, like having like a little bit of light on that horizon on the back end, I like that, and it'll help balance that tree out with like the warm versus the overall cool. So see now, I had a little bit of green originally in the rock. I have a more broader spectrum of grays in the sky. I'm introducing little bursts of light, coming where those holes in the clouds are. I eventually go a little far with those and I have to fix it at the end. But it's like when you're eating one of those fruit snacks, like the gushers, just bite in, or like a cherry tomato, and it just bursts. That's exactly what's happening here with this light. And it's just like, right, lots of thick layers. That sun's coming in, it's just gonna shatter it where it can peek through, and that's what I'm trying to portray. Now this is a very simple technique I love to do in a painting like this, is just take the airbrush and throttle up that atmosphere. It's great. It simplifies a lot of detail. It lets me work in silhouettes. Like, see, we could just see the silhouettes of the rocks. But it's a push and pull sort of thing. Like I'm adding it in, I'm going to take it out, and then I'm going to move things around because I'm feeling, essentially kind of feeling my way out. But I do love adding this very physical sense and presence of that light and atmosphere. I can guess it's going to imply these subtle expressions of movement. And for a painting like this, that is the best expression of movement, a subtle one. The famous fantasy characterist Frank Frazetta was really good at stuff like that. If he had a character standing still, he had a way of making the character look like it was in motion in so many subtle ways. I'm trying to do all of that, but with like rocks and trees, which is it's quite a bit hard actually. So I might not hit all those goals, but at least I know, right? Having a goal for an image is ideal. I always don't practice what I preach, and those images take longer. I get frustrated more, and they can tend to drag a little too much because I'm a little more aimless or careless about things. I think it's good to do that once in a while, but like having a quasi plan in place for the image, that's the big takeaway here. Get your idea out as quickly as you can, get that sketch done, then draw up a plan. Hey, am I going to use a photo for this? Am I going to use 3D for this? Am I going to paint it all? Am I going to draw all the little details of this, then paint over them? Like have that plan, outline it, mimic what works too, right? Like I have a Pinterest board, unrelated to anything here, but it has just works in progress, things that I make. Like I'll go and find GIFs on like ArtStation that people upload, or I'll get the work in progress slides from like people's Instagrams. I'll snapshot and make my own little like work in progress, step 1, step 2, and I love it. I use it mostly at this point for educational purpose, so when a student works differently than I do, I can kind of show them the different steps. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with emulating a process and a procedure that's been proven effective and works. So I used to do that when I was training. I just used to copy everybody's processes to see what was a good fit for me, because everyone does work a little bit differently. So here, we've got a little bit of the sky working for now, kind of placeholdery. We got a big landmass on the right, got some rocks that are looking a little more three-dimensional, and I'm trying to basically sort that out a little bit more on the left and balance the overall values of the sky. I think I wanted to like light that sky up slightly, very incrementally, bring in a little bit more of the colors. That's why I'm just adjusting like these color sliders. And again, it allows me to play with a few other options that I may not thinking of. Oh, what does this sky look like with like 10% more yellow or 15% more green in it? Things like that. But now I'm like, okay, this is working here. I want to see if there's a better option, right? Because I'm not coming from a place where I did like 10 thumbnails of this, so I want to do a little more exploring. The cost for me at this stage is time, because I'm juggling light, color, and these shapes, and I'm trying to figure all that out at once. That's why doing this sort of exploration at this stage is a little bit tough. I definitely don't recommend it for inexperienced painters, because you have to juggle those that many factors. But like this allows me at this stage to really figure out those other possibilities, the woulda, shoulda, coulda, woulda, what ifs, right? Those. So I'm like, what what if this is just like a bit more open? Like how does that flow and that movement works? And so that's why I just rotated the camera. Flip the camera, the angle or the canvas horizontally, which is super easy, right? If you're working in any digital software. When we're like painting on oils and watercolors, we have to like hang it up to mirrors and stuff and like try to look at it. It was a lot more inconvenient. But that's really the reason I became a digital artist, because I'm kind of lazy at the end of the day, and I like my conveniences. Digital, very convenient. So here, right, I'm using a little more lasso. I haven't been using this lasso, like you see here, as much as I actually typically do. I usually abuse it a lot more. But, it allows me, if there's like if there's a bunch of pixels in here, because I'm not really painting on very meticulous layers, forget that. I'm just kind of throwing at it. Because this, again, right, was originally for a feedback I give, and those generally range at about 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm just racing against, just trying to get things done and to kind of show different ways to do this. So I'm not taking my time, let's say. But yeah, like rotating it helps me identify these things. Selection tool helps me select big, complicated shapes. And like, for me, ultimately, like right now, I'm like, the way that tree leaning, no matter how I view that canvas, I think could be more dynamic if like it's moving, in that wind with the flow of this river. That's what I'm trying to get across. It took literally up to this, sorry, COVID cough. It took me up to that segment to really kind of realize that. Like, I knew I wanted to do something with the tree, but I wasn't sure what exactly that was. So what I'm doing here is readjusting all those, recalibrating it. See, I'm like, what if I move this whole chunk of the tree up there? I know, like, I hate this shape of the tree. It's like a big Twinkie, like I kind of like those shapes more for my clouds. For this tree, I want it like fluttering, fluttering in the wind. I want to. I dressed this at the very end here. Little bits of those leaves just kind of trickling away. Usually, when it comes to design, when it comes to like envisioning an environment, kind of like this, I like to get the trick is I like to get my headspace into like, what is the experience of this place like if we were being there. Having memories, having your own life experience helps with this a ton, obviously. But like, I'm like, is the wind chilly? How strong is the wind? What kind of smells are in nature at this point? Are we smelling like low tide, or is it more like fresh breeze from the through the pastures? Something like that. So, yeah, and how are these shapes making me feel? Those are the sort of questions I'm trying to internalize as I'm bringing something like this forward and forward at each step. I'm not sure how much, because I don't remember at this stage. My perspective's a little skewed since I've been doing this forever. I don't think I did that as much when I was kind of starting out. It was more about technique, just getting things looking good. Probably rightfully so, but now it's like, what is it like here? And I'm trying to make that service the picture, at every kind of technical aspect that I can. But yeah, like I like that tree. It has like a little bit more of a lean. It's like getting pushed by time, maybe erosion, maybe by this wind. A little more character, a little bit more like gnarly branches. So I like that. And I can just kind of imply these rock faces, right? The surface of that rock behind it, because I don't want to heavily detail those. I'm detailing this tree. That's the focal point, which means I got to simplify things around it. Otherwise, it becomes a cluster of a mess, and I'm trying to organize that mess here. See, I'm playing with light here. I like doing this sometimes. Again, it's more explorative stuff. Like, I know I want the air to do something back there, but I'm trying to find the best kind of combination of things that I want to kind of get that across. So, like, again, just softening some of those hard shapes. I dumped in a lot of hard shapes to this. This is a good way to soften some of them and add another layer of that air into there without, losing things entirely, right? So I'm deleting things. I'm bringing that light down. See, I selected the tree shape. It helps like bring a little of that light, because it's all shadow, right? It's all surface. And what I want to do, because like I don't have an attention span for real long form paintings. I like to get stuff done under 10 hours most of the time, regardless. This, of course, this is like, I took like a 20-minute demo, and I went a little further with this. I think the total time was somewhere between an hour and 90 minutes, which is what I'd want for this sort of image. But yeah, I'm not trying to spend too much time on this right now, and I'm trying to get like these big things happening with it, right? So now I'm like, what if there were a rhythm of rocks, a rhythm of stones cascading across this river, and it's gonna make these little bleeps of the rocks, the boop boop. Those are the rhythms I'm talking about, like big shape, tiny shape, no shape, big shape, no shape. It adds interest, and it's driving a movement line right to the base of that tree. So this is what I call kind of like subjectively manipulating a viewer. If we do our job okay, they'll never think twice about it. They'll never even understand. They're just like, oh yeah, this painting looks good, right? We're just adding that kind of production value to it. And then I'll play this up, right? I'm gonna add probably like a few more rocks. I know there's like, this is a big chunky mess in this area where my brush is right now. That's gonna have to get sorted out. So I'm like, eventually I'm like, what if I add, see, like this, a little more of a base with the like a bank of like sand or mud. I kind of went in there, I was tweaking that a little bit. I'm still playing with like how much detail, because I am over detailing it here, but I realize I'm gonna cover a lot of that up with softer movements of water and stuff, and maybe even potentially like a little atmosphere like you see here. So like I said before, pushing and pulling, adding detail, taking detail away, making brush strokes, stretching those brush strokes. It's just me versus this painting, and I feel like it's kind of like, it's just like it's going back and forth, and hopefully, and when I say back and forth too, I'm not meaning like take one step forward, one step backward. I'm inferring like the steps forward aren't always like linear. Step forward is like forward, sometimes you step right, sometimes you step left, sometimes you do like a football maneuver. I don't even know what they call, because I know nothing about football, right? Where they do the turn, someone will know, and you're going forward, right? It's always like shaking off that obstacle. Sometimes brush work is like an obstacle. You use one brush, you abuse it too much, it's going to look stiff, it's going to look static. So it's like you apply it, manipulate it, lay it, and then you can move forward. Hope some of that made sense. I realize in this format of video I can ramble. I apologize, of course, ahead of time on that, but that is the nature of these things. These unscripted painting demos. All right, so here I want to get the silhouette of that area working a little better, which is going to require a little bit more atmo, right? So selection, I'm scrubbing back and forth with an airbrush. I've really only used airbrushes and like a square brush, like 2 to 3 brushes on something like this max. You don't need to get caught up with the fanciness of brushes. At best, when you're experienced, they'll just help you save a little bit of time if you have something very, like repeated, or like maybe like a specific texture. It helps. It helps. No one's going to deny that. But they're not necessary at all. Let's get that disclaimer out. So, yep, we got that. I want to get like a little bit of these sharper edges poking out on the forms on these rocks. So, right, because that light's coming down. It's fairly soft ambient light, all things considered. It's a little more direct at the base of that tree. But I want to poke some of these highlights of that light hitting, like, I can apply the rocks are perhaps subtly wet, or have that moisture in the atmosphere. So yeah, that's going to add to that sorry, that whole experience just a little bit there. See, I overblew. I referred to this earlier. I overblew the light too much coming out of the big light pocket on the upper left, and I do have to like tone that back considerably after. And that's what happens sometimes. We're like, when you're working fast, when your hand can't keep up with your mind, and even though I'm painting like the sky, my mind is already thinking about, okay, what do I gotta do, with those leaves. Something like that happens pretty commonly for me, because like I'll see a cool idea with this, and my hands just physically cannot keep up with the spastic nature of my headspace. How many of you out there are like that as well? Or you're just like, I gotta work on this section. I gotta work. I know there's some very diligent workers out there that'll like zoom in and just like work on that tree for like the better part of a day. That's just never been me. But yeah, see, now I'm using both with those highlights on the rocks and these branches on the trees and stuff. I'm finally getting in there using a smaller brush. Again, sculpting out some of like the banks of like the grass as well. I'm finally using a tinier brush at this stage to get some of those little details, those smaller shapes that my big chunky brushes that I like to start with just couldn't handle. They couldn't handle it. They can't take the precision and the delicacy of like those little chiseled shapes. But I don't want to start with those because, like, well, you know, it's like you got to solve the larger parts of any kind of painting first. It works better 9 out of 10 times. See, like I'm kind of playing with adding like a little bit more light, hitting those. You know, if this was like, let's say we take this from like a 90-minute painting, bump that to like even like a 4 to 5 hour painting, like you could really get in there and really dig into like details and finessing the brushwork. I feel like I could say everything I need to say within 90 minutes on this, but it's gonna have some rougher, more, let's say, more expressive attributes of it. So you know, some paintings, for, and especially too for beginners, this painting would have taken me like, you know, 6 hours to do what I did 90 minutes, you know, like 10 years ago. That's fine. It's not about speed, but like just manage your own expectations, I would say, with your work, so that like you're not expecting something finished and something portfolio worthy in 90 minutes. I think at the end of the day, good work, quality work is usually and most always going to just take time, and we all need to have a little bit of that patience just to see paintings through those uglier steps, those uglier stages that all paintings generally go through. It's normal. It's part of the process. But I see people out there just getting mad all the time because like they spend 2 hours on an image and it still looks like crap. It's like, yeah, that's for most people. That's normal. Be easy on yourself. But yeah, this is good. What other updates do I got going on? While this is wrapping up, I'm putting the last little details on this thing up. We're just starting the 2 new fresh terms at CGMA. I got 2 maxed out classes. I started letting them overdraft them a little bit. It's going to be a busy term, but a lot of good questions are going to come in. These questions fuel topics and ideas that I post, you know, for these videos. They help me and my designers work on content for the Instagram reels. Make sure, if you had followed me before on Instagram, I got my account hacked and deleted in October. We're rebuilding, almost up to 5K on that finally again, which was bittersweet because I saw a photo on my phone where I screenshotted this point last year. I was celebrating hitting I think it was like 35 or 40K a year ago from now. Now I'm just like trying to get to that 5 again, you know, small fish in a big pond. But yeah, other than that, I think the mentorship's booked till, I think I'm filled till like September, maybe at this point. I'm gonna be trying to do, I'm also outlining like more of like a group-based mentorship with very focused specific things. Like I want to do group-based environment design like mentorships. I'm in the works of planning that. If you guys are interested in stuff like that, let me know, and let me know what kind of content you'd want. Would you want it be more built, would you want me to teach more to like how do you gear your work for portfolio? Would it be more focused on just like raw fundamentals? Let me know. I'm interested in hearing that, and we're going to continue to develop and push that. So thank you for watching, and do take care.